So it's a pity that I was back there and I missed out on the rubbing, so you owe me one. Thank you very much. My name is Maarten Oonk, as being said. I work for Deloitte Center for the Edge. This is a research center anchored in Silicon Valley and with centers in Amsterdam, Oslo, Zurich, and since a few weeks also here in Bucharest. I moved here 5-6 weeks ago. And it's basically my job in the next 3 years to launch and to bring digital technology, but especially the new business protocols to the area of Romania and basically enhance the position of the country, as being said also in the first panel that we saw. And I will start with a small video. So you see here 4 insets of probably things that you not necessarily see every day on the news. So what you see here are drones that can actually swim rather than just fly. We see something what we call programmable matter, so 4D printing. We see generative design, also already applied in any kind of Airbus that you see around here, and of course the development of 5G. And the question is, what is the opportunity from all these new technologies for your corporate innovation? So if you look at corporations, there's a lot of buzz around startups. And especially in, let's say, where the center has been founded in Silicon Valley, everything is about startups. But in the end, not so many startups succeed, and no startup actually wants to be a startup. They want to be a successful corporate. So it's our aspiration basically to get the corporates to innovate. And the title of my presentation said, but to do that, especially in those dynamic times, we need to unlearn everything that we learned. And that we are programmed in a way in the past maybe 100, 200 years. And it is a very, very difficult task. So what I will highlight is what we actually need to unlearn in order to grab the potential of emerging technology and not see it as a disruption of something that we can be afraid of. And first some background. So what do we see? We see these emerging developments, we see these dynamic times, and if you look back and you take, for example, the development of any kind of phone. So in the 50s of the last century, we had this very old, what we call bakelit telephone that was on my nightcap of my grandmother's. It took around 50 years for half of the Western population to actually have this phone. Then we had the second, let's say, generation of phones where you could actually walk. And it took only 16 years for the same kind of population, 50% of the Western population, to have that one. And for a mobile phone in 2010, it was only 6 years. And I can, I think, reasonably argue that for now, every major telephone operator or producer of a telephone mobile company needs to basically have new cell phones every year. So the time in which we can actually get a return on R&D investments on new products and new services is only diminishing. And we've been seeing that over some other piece of research that we did in the US. We looked at every major listed company, so everyone that is on the stock exchange, and we looked at what did actually digital technology bring those companies. And we took as a measure what we call the return on assets. And we looked at all those companies from the 60s onwards until 2015, and over time you see a diminishing return on assets. So we have all this emerging, new, amazing technology, and none of the companies actually benefit from it. And what we see is that companies only work harder for less return. And why is that? That's because we are very efficiently driven. Everything that we do is focused on efficiency, cost reduction. You will probably see whenever the times are hard, someone will say we need to cut cost, rather than focus on where is the new growth. So if you see this graph, and of course it's over a lot of years, it's not just a few years or few companies, this is very consistent decline of return on assets from an economic point of view. So our thinking based on this research, and we've done it 3 times, so in 2013, 2015, and 2018. And there's no reason to believe that this will change over time. So we thought, why not change the paradigm? Why would we focus on efficiency and not on learning? Why not be much more flexible, much more resilient and responsive to change, rather than focusing on making plans where the gain basically will be there somewhere, maybe in 2 to 3 years, when you squeeze out the last part of this efficiency-driven operations, but you change that paradigm and you focus on learning. But that learning only applies for new areas. You cannot just change your core business overnight. So you have to identify areas where you can learn to be more responsive. To give you a little bit of background, what's driving this change is this graph, and you might have seen it before at multiple levels, but I still think it's important to understand that if you see and look at digital technology, everything is driven by Moore's law. So every 20 to 24 months, we see a cost performance improvement of 100%. So every 20 to 24 months, we see that the costs of bandwidth, capacity, and speed of computer chips basically decline by 100%. And at the same time, we as organizations and individuals are programmed in a linear way. So there's a challenge. In the beginning, like 30 years ago when 3D printing was developed, it was really bad compared to the traditional manufacturing technologies. But over time, it became better and better and better, and now we see a lot of application of 3D printing in any kind of business-to-business area. And most companies that are not aware or understand what 3D printing actually is or what it can do are basically lagging behind. They cannot keep up with the speed of which 3D printing and ultimately 4D printing is developing. So in this disappointment phase, so this first phase before the tipping point, that's where I would challenge any company to invest time, money, not too much, but enough to really understand what is it? And what is in the context of my company the relevance of this technology? If we take 9 months ago, maybe 9 months ago, blockchain. When I talked about blockchain, everyone was like, oh, whatever. Now everyone is talking about blockchain. So now it's actually, so if you would have spent 6 months ago at least some effort as where does it apply to my business, you might be much better prepared in identifying it's relevant or not. I should invest or I should not invest, especially now when the hype becomes much more prominent in the public space. So this is what we call the big shift. So we see fundamental shifts in the business landscape. And those are twofold. One is the technology part, so which I just explained, and the other one is about new business practices. And those both elements drive us to think that we have to move from scalable efficiency to scalable learning. Learning as the key paradigm for future growth, not for your core business and optimizing it, for those new areas where you see potentially your company heading off. Few examples of those. So let's take wholesale to crowdsource supply chain services. This is Li & Fung. This is a 100-year-old company from Hong Kong, and they are traditionally in the trade business, and nowadays they dynamically configure supply chains by using a platform. So what they do, Levi's needs 1 million new pair of jeans in the shops in Romania, and they say to Li & Fung, do that for me. And they have a network of 20,000 different suppliers, and they will automatically configure a supply chain to deliver those 1 million pairs of jeans in the shops. From sourcing the material, production, distribution, and the model they use is basically similar to Uber. So everyone in the supply chain has to rate everyone in the supply chain how well they perform their task. If you are basically doing 2 or 3 times not so well, you're out of the system. So everyone is incentivized to basically constantly deliver higher quality, and the end user, in this case Levi's, basically benefits the most. This is a mobilization platform, and we did research amongst the participants on this platform, and there was one single answer that we got: why are you on this platform? Because we can never learn faster on this platform than we could ever do on our own. Second example, also based on fast learning. This is Local Motors. Local Motors is a company that produces personalized and customized 3D printed cars in the US 10 years ago. And their real asset is a crowd of 52,000 engineers worldwide that built those cars and designed those cars. It's a very small company, 115 people, and they're now building autonomous spots in Berlin. They're doing cargo drones with Airbus. And this real asset is 52,000 people that are so passionate about engineering that they will leverage and bring their capabilities to this platform almost for free. Final example, just let's say much more like a crossover between blockchain and autonomous driving. In this case, Toyota thought, okay, if I need to basically harness all those data to prove to the US government that an autonomous driving vehicle is safe, why not use blockchain to basically get out of the way of the contracting? So this is a way where autonomous driving in itself already, let's say, an exponential technology is being combined with emerging technologies where they can accelerate innovation faster. They get to the point of commercialization faster, and that ultimately is the goal of innovation. You have to create a valuable proposition into the market that people want to buy. And then we have something like creation spaces, also something that we really don't know in Europe that much. Maker spaces, creation spaces, spaces where people are free to come and go and basically put in their creativity. This is a creation space at Autodesk in the US, where people can just work with machines and create stuff without actually having an objective or a contract. The only thing that they have to write down or to sign is a waiver that if they damage themselves, it's not the fault of Autodesk, which makes sense. So to put this into perspective, I already told about the difference between the core business and new areas. So within Deloitte, and especially the Dublin practice, we identified 3 levels of growth. And these are very important when you discuss innovation within your company. So the first one is core, the second one is adjacent, and the third one is transformational. And don't mix them up. Because core innovation has a business case, a return on investment, transformational innovation doesn't. And the reason why that is because in the transformational area there are more questions than answers. So those are what we call the unknown opportunities. In the core and the, let's say, slightly adjacent area, you see the known and the knowable. So that's where you actually can ask for a business case. Anyone that will ask for a business case on a large manufacturing company using or exploring the potential of blockchain will basically make a business case of hope. I think that, I hope, I assume that. Don't do that. That doesn't make sense because you are still exploring new areas. What I do is help companies with this transformation. We try companies to forget a little bit about the core business, free up their mind and say, okay, what if in 10 years' time? Look at what consumers will do with all those technologies that I showed in the beginning. I will just shout and make it. So what will you do? And if you have this perspective of how the world and your industry, your market, and maybe your company might look like in 10 years' time, then go back to the current and say, what are those crucial initiatives that I have to start tomorrow to basically get those answers that will guide me towards that transformative future that I see for myself. And that's when I come to the concept what we call scaling edges. So forget about your core business, forget about incremental innovation for a bit. Let's focus on those new growth areas. And we call them edges because they are on the edge of your current business. And that's because it's not like if you run a bike factory that you are suddenly building cars. There should always be a relationship with your core DNA. If you don't do that, you're just building a new business. Fine, but don't mix that up. But if you really want to transform your business, you need to connect with the core without actually mixing them up too much. And if you're talking about developing such an edge, it's not a big bang transformation. Any executive that comes back from a training and says, I've seen the light, we're going to do it fundamentally different. Basically what this guy does is basically drawing a very big bullseye on the back of his jacket. And everyone that's against change will try to attack him without actually knowing. So don't make it a big bang effort at first. It's also not an innovation program. An edge is potentially your new core business. So also treat it like your new core business and not as a program or initiative or a project. You need also different people. I'll come to that later. So an edge, in our definition, needs in the beginning, on the short term, a minimal investment. and it has the potential to grow the pie, and in the long term, it has to align with long-term, let's say, disruptive trends, and has to be the potential to transform the core. So you're slowly pulling your core business towards this new, let's say, dimension that you have identified as being a realistic or viable business environment that you could be in. So you have to be aware of those antibodies of change, as I mentioned. And there are a lot of antibodies of change in your company. Probably 80% of everyone in your company doesn't like change. There's no boardroom where the CEO or anyone said, let's change, and that there were people who would say, I don't do change. I will sit here and wait until everything is done. I'm not doing change. Everyone will not go back to their office and say, what am I going to do to prevent this change from happening? Because I've been coming here for the past 30 years and not going to waste that on someone that thinks change is good. So to avoid the tendency to go to war. It's part of a very old and famous Chinese book, The Art of War. The moment you embrace in war, you're already lost. So don't go to war with the antibodies of change. So what else? What should you do? Make it small, maybe a little bit irrelevant at the moment, and scale very quickly. The moment you know how it works, and you can scale it to relevance, someone will say, what happened? And then basically it's too late for them to basically attack you. Staff for passion, not for skills. Very important. So in your core company, you will probably look for the very skilled people that can run that operation very efficiently and effectively. If you are exploring new areas of growth around emerging technologies, you need those people that are in that platform, those 52,000 engineers from Local Motors that are so passionate about blockchain, IoT, AI, whatever you have identified as realistic and valuable for you, that say, I will spend my whole weekend on this new opportunity. And those passionate people will basically pull out people from your core business and say, I want to be part of that movement. Because in the end, and you have to look it up, Local Motors has a very nice manifesto, which basically is their narrative, what they are. And the first sentence is, in the simplest terms, we are an automotive company. But our true purpose goes far beyond that. We are here to disrupt the status quo of the manufacturing industry. And that last sentence is much more powerful because that's what attracted people to join this movement, not that they are building a car. It's nice for an engineer, but that movement attracted partners, other companies in their ecosystem to join that movement and make it happen. And making it happen is, I think, one of the most important elements of change. Show, prove to the real world that whatever you tell them, whether it's marketing or not, is for real, that you mean it, that you are passionate about it. Third element, leverage ecosystems. Leveraged growth is, I think, one of the most powerful ways nowadays that we can use. So I mentioned the big shift, so the technology part I covered. The other part is what we call the eroding barriers to entry, access, knowledge, and learning. Anyone with a little bit of, let's say, a capability can do a course on Coursera for free, learn to code, and I would also really challenge, in line with the statement, I think, from the CEO of Microsoft, learn your kids to code. Send them to a coding camp just to make sure that they know what it is. But if you have the ability, you can do a free course on the internet, learn to code, open a web shop on Amazon Web Services, and start basically, for example, selling programmable robots that you buy in China. It will take you I think up to maybe 6 to 9 months and you're in business. And those eroding barriers, everyone can basically enter your market for very, very limited costs. But also those people are there for free for you. So traditional practices in your core business will limit you. Procurement, legal will say you cannot do that. You cannot just use people outside the company. You have to hire them and send them a contract. An edge might be typically an area where you can experiment with new business practices and how you can actually use or leverage a crowd for your purpose, for your growth areas. And a very interesting one is First Build. It's an accelerator from GE Appliances. And they have basically built an edge for GE. It's open innovation, as they call it. And they use this platform from local motors to basically build new appliances. So refrigerators, stoves, etc. And everyone could join, even a competition. It was also very, very transparent what they were working on. And they leveraged the crowd of people to basically accelerate the speed of innovation by 50 times. So normally it took 4 years. They design, build and sell products, new product every 2 months for 50,000 euros using this crowd. So it's basically for free. So Starve the Edge, no big budget. So I think it's the nicest one. Everyone likes this one. But it's also true. If you start a new initiatives, and it's not really around IoT, it's a business initiative, it's a potential value area where you see your company heading. And if you give them, let's say for the first year 10 million, they will be lazy. Someone will be asking questions where the 10 million comes from and what they are doing with it and what the return on is. So if you make it big, people will start asking questions and your antibodies will activate themselves much faster and much harder than in a normal situation. So start very small, use it, do drip feeding like a VC. Just give them enough money in order to prove that they're on the right track, and the moment you have this proof, you give them a little bit more, and the moment you crack the code, you scale it quickly, and then you can actually invest more heavily. Focus on trajectory, not position. Most companies, at least in the, let's say, old days, had an ambition to be the first. I want to be the best bank. I want to be the first in retail. Why not focus on, this is my direction, this is where I'm heading. It's not a position. You're constantly pivoting around this sense of direction, trying to find out how can I make it work in my company? How can I actually transform and use my current DNA, my ecosystem to actually go there? But it's not a fixed point that you're heading to. It's not like, okay, we made it, check the box, back to business. This is a constant movement. If you really want to change and transform in these days, you have to be constantly on the move. And that's what we call our zoom out, zoom in approach. So take a 10+ year zoom out perspective and a very, very short 6 to 12 months period where you actually activate yourself and start doing stuff. And within those 6 months, you will get the proof points and can show the world that this 10-year+ vision is actually for real. That you mean it and that you're actually heading there. And then you might even become a shaper of your industry. You're actively showing the world, this is where we're heading. We're not reacting, we're proactively moving forward. And then this is basically this sums it all up. You have the core business in blue, you have the green dots, which are the edges, and ultimately we believe that those edges can become your core business. And there are questions about where to innovate, what areas are relevant to us, how to innovate, so where can you actually identify those passionate people that are driving the scaling of those edges, and how to scale quickly. And this is not an easy job. It's not a recipe that I can give you. It's very difficult. We haven't seen that many very good examples. Most companies tend ultimately, if something is successful, to bring it back into the core business. Don't do that, because it will be killed by the immune system, but it's very, very tempted. So 3 lessons. Move from stocks to flows of knowledge. Don't sit on your knowledge, IP, etc. Reach out to that community out there that can help you accelerate your innovation. Move from manpower to digital power. On edges, and I'm not talking about the core business, don't add digital to your current operations. If you do that, you are seeing only incremental change. Start from scratch and think about really digital first. And move from efficiency to learning. So apply the Li and Fung model. How can you actually learn faster? By experimenting constantly and not focusing on efficiency. So key questions for success. On the right-hand side, you will see everything, or for you on the left-hand side, you will see everything that you see in your core business. Linear mindset, stocks of knowledge, scalable efficiency, select for task, and adding digital. And I would challenge you to identify areas where you can actually apply the right-hand side. So this exponential mindset, starting digital from a blank sheet, collaboration for growth, and scale learning rather than efficiency. That is for me. If you want to reach me, those are my details. I hope you enjoyed my talk, and I will be here for another, let's say, a few hours to see what else is on the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maarten.